What you're looking at is an anomaly in the supercar world. This was a car that just sort of showed up, held a party, then when its name was called to welcome everyone here, it disappeared and was never seen from again. Hello racing fans, my name is Road Hazard, and this is, or rather I should say was, a Marussia B2, aka Russia's first supercar. This car and the company that made it was a complete anomaly. Marussia Motors was founded in 2007 and released their first car in 2008, the B1, a geometrically shaped sports car that bears a slight resemblance to the Bugatti Zonda. Then in 2009 they released its successor, the B2, a even more geometrically shaped sports car with a front end style in the shape of an M, highlighted grille and intakes, and a futuristic interior. After that, they joined Formula One, calling themselves Marussia F1, but after 2 years of racing, they disbanded and returned back to the world of motoring with a reasonably priced SUV called the F2 in 2012, only to finally shut their doors entirely in 2014. And that's it. That is the history of this car and its company. This is actually one of the only cars in the world where Wikipedia actually knows more about it than all the bloggers and official news articles do. The funny thing is, however, that people actually like this car. And it wasn't like it was a car that just sort of worked one day and didn't work the next. It was actually passed the safest car in Russia's crash tests. And though only 500 units of the B2 were made, every last one of them sold. They even had plans for a successor, the B3, which would have been a smoother, less geometrically shaped sports car with triangle headlights and taillights. There are three major game developers that were lucky enough to be allowed to have this car in their games: Need for Speed, Evolution Studios, and Gameloft. We'll start with Gameloft, and for those who don't know, Gameloft is the people responsible for the mobile sensation that is the Asphalt series. They were also the first to include the B2 in their car list in Asphalt 7 of 2012. They placed it in the supercar bracket and gave it a rather impressive handling stat, which made it an excellent choice for the tight and twisty courses, while its speed and acceleration made it competitive against the Lamborghinis and Ferraris on the track. Later that year in November, Need for Speed unveiled this car in their remake of Most Wanted, one of their greatest titles ever made. It also made it a DLC car in Need for Speed World, which you could customize, and even made it a prize car during one of their online tournaments. The car Most Wanted was once again categorized as a supercar, like an Asphalt. However, it wasn't until Need for Speed Rivals in 2013 that the car got its shining moment. Whereas previous titles had it as a racer, Rivals had it as a cop car in 3 different factions. They also placed it near the bottom of the car list as the 5th car you earn after you get the Aston Martin Vanquish. Another unusual fact was that the engine in Rivals was sounded distinctly different from the other two games that featured it. Whereas Asphalt and Most Wanted had the engine sounding low and growling, Rivals had it sounding high-pitched and humming.
Standing down from code 3. Target got away.
Copy that. All units, pursuit unsuccessful. Be on the lookout for escape 1044.
In the real world, there were two different engine options for this car. A 2.8 liter turbocharged V6 producing 420 brake horsepower, and a naturally aspirated 3.5 liter V6 producing 360 brake horsepower. Now, a naturally aspirated engine, unless it's a Ferrari, usually has a low growling noise that rattles the bones. Whereas the turbocharged engine makes a high-pitched roar or hum that buzzes in the ears. This may also explain why in Rivals the B2, despite being low on the car list, seems to outperform the cars around it in terms of keeping up with suspects, beating rapid responses, and overall being a very manageable cop car. I have busted racers that were driving AMG Mercedes, Ferraris 458s, Ferraris 599, GTOs, Lamborghini Grottos, Lamborghini Aventadors, Corvettes, Mustangs. I've even busted K1s with this car, making it one of the best performing cop cars in the game. It's then a real shame that Forza never got a hold of this Anomaly. It would have been nice to see this car on a real track, such as Sebring or Road America. Lastly, we have Evolution Studios, the creators of the PlayStation 4 exclusive Drive Club, and were the last major developers to feature this car in 2014 exclusively for the PlayStation 4, just as Marussia Motors had closed its doors indefinitely. The car was back as a racer, sitting high on the car list next to McLaren 12Cs, the Aventador, the Ferrari F12, even the Porsche 911 GT3. However, like Rivals, this version of the car differs. The engine sounds more in line with Most Wanted and Asphalt, though a bit muffled. We also, for the first time, have a cockpit view, which allows us to see the very futuristic interior. However, where the car differs most is in its handling. Up to now, its infamous agility and gripping handling has been easy to pick up and master. But here in Drive Club, that ease is oddly missing. On your first initial drive, the car will send you crashing into walls and into other drivers. The brakes, while responsive, require a great deal of effort to slow you back down. And when exiting the corner, one has to feather the throttle or they will spin out. To be fair, however, this is not uncommon, as arcade racers like Need for Speed and Asphalt do dumb up the handlings to make it easier for casual players to drive and master. Thus, when playing a racing game with a more heavier focus on simulation, it can be a bit of a culture shock when the same car in Need for Speed suddenly doesn't handle the same way in Drive Club. Still, even with hours of practice, one cannot help but realize that this incredible handling ability is only really unlocked when fully alert and prepared. In other words, you gotta know your corners before you hit them. In a race against a Lamborghini Huracan, I was barely able to keep up, only managing to keep a car's length distance between us for half the race before spinning out at a tight turn. Yet in the race against a AMG Mercedes, however, the match couldn't be closer. Both of us passing each other in the corners and racing neck and neck in the straightaways. This difference in performance is most likely due to the fact that, as well as being a simulation, the B2, like the AMG Mercedes, is rear-wheel drive, whereas the Huracan is all-wheel drive. And here again we have another thing that arcade racers don't really do a good job of demonstrating. Still, by no means am I suggesting that the B2 is a bad handling car. Instead, what I'm saying that in Drive Club, it's not an easy car to drive. This means you're always going to have to keep in mind where the corners are and how to get around them. Because even when you do get the handle on the handling, it's only going to make you slightly faster than the mainstream rivals. Now, to some, this conclusion is a deal breaker, and as such, it will never be a go-to choice for online events. However, when you remind yourself where this car comes from the real world, this deal breaker is actually very impressive. Russia's first supercar is only slightly faster than its European rivals. Russia is a country that hasn't really had a strong focus on automotives. Their most well-known car in the world is the Lada Nova, a car that is just uninspiring and hasn't really improved since the 1980s. So to go from a Lada to making a supercar that is slightly faster than its European giants is, well, an anomaly. 7 years is how long Marussia Motors lasted, and in those 7 years they made 3 production cars, one of which was featured in 6 major video game titles. They joined Formula 1 and raced for nearly 2 years, and had plans for a fleet of cars to sell across the world. But by far their greatest success was creating a supercar seemingly from thin air that could race with names that have been around for nearly half a century. When you remind yourself of these facts while viewing this car in Drive Club's car list, or indeed any of the 6 games that have this car in their selection, you can't help but drive it and experience this anomaly for yourself. Its handling in Drive Club may not get you first place, but you won't be bored when racing with it. It may only be a cop car in Rivals, but you will be constantly surprised how many races you're able to bust with it. As for the older titles like Most Wanted and Asphalt 7 or even Asphalt 8, the experience should be even more special, as these were the first titles to add this car to their selection. Personally, I've always preferred the B2 in Rivals than anywhere else. It may not be the most realistic in terms of handling or engine sound, but you can enjoy the anomaly this car represents a lot more freely than in other titles. So, that's it. That is the Marussia B2. An anomaly that came and went as fast as the car accelerates. It would be nice to see the car return both in the real and virtual world. However, it's very unlikely that this will happen. So until that day, look for it in the 6 games that have it in their car selection and drive it. Drive it as a cop, drive it as a racer, or drive it as a jet-powered record breaker on your mobile devices. If it will not live on in the real world, then let us ensure that it lives on in the virtual.